You couldn't name a single 1940s or 1950s performer who wasn't touched by Bing Crosby's music. As alluring as celebrity and fortune may seem, they conceal a tragic story of familial secrets and traumas. The suicides of his kids beg the question why, how significant was Bing Crosby's confession thereafter? Come mourn with us, the two sons of Bing Crosby, who committed suicide in the wake of his tragic confession. It is necessary to grasp the background information before examining these discoveries. The glitter and glamour of Hollywood can mask the more sinister realities that lie underneath. A profound familial sorrow that would continue to trouble Bing Crosby throughout his life was concealed by his public presence as America's greatest performer. What, though, exactly are these admissions about which the reader could not stand to hear? How do his boys relate to these confessions? In 1906, the Bing Crosby tale started in the Pacific Northwest. A multi-talented American Harry Lillis, Bing Crosby Jr. came into this world on May 3, 1903. He was a singer, actor, producer, radio host, and businessman. His father, a bookkeeper named Harry Lowe Crosby, was born in England in 1871 and passed away in 1950. Additionally, the daughter of a builder from Ireland's County Mayo, Catherine Harrigan, was born in 1873 and passed away in 1964. She was an Irish American. As the fourth of 7 children, Bing Crosby came into this world in a home that his dad had constructed. In 1906, in search of employment, his family relocated to Spokane, Washington. A hilarious newspaper column known as the Bingville Bugle was enjoyed by 6-year-old Harry Lillis Crosby. From Bingville, he was known as Bingo by an older lad who lived nearby and who shared Crosby's love of the Bugle. Bing became his lifelong nickname once the final vowel was eliminated and the name was abbreviated. Crosby worked as a property boy at Spokane's auditorium for the summer of 1917, when he saw legendary performers like Al Jolson, who captivated young Bing. Though he would later claim otherwise, Crosby was undeniably one of the most famous and consequential musicians of the 20th century, and he was also the first major multimedia star. The Spokane family uprooted their lives when Bing was 3 years old and settled in the mining and lumber town. Bing grew up listening to the music of legendary performers like Al Jolson, thanks to his accountant father Harry, who had one of the first record players in Spokane. Bing had already gotten his moniker from a childhood friend when he enrolled at Gonzaga University. Bing thrived in athletics and public speaking despite the fact that his Jesuit upbringing emphasized masculinity. He excelled at debate and had a passion for language and elocution. Following a brief stint at Gonzaga University's law school, Bing joined a local band with pianist Al Rinker to pursue his passion for music. Although Bing had a rocky start and was infamously unreliable because of his jazz-age lifestyle, his magnetism and brilliance eventually shone through. Despite their intense rivalry on the field, he and Bob Hope remained friends, and their bond paved the way for the legendary Road to Film trilogy. During his stay at the Los Angeles Metropolitan Theater in 1926, Crosby gained the attention of Paul Whiteman, a renowned band leader of the day. He and his singing partner Al Rinker, whom he had worked with since his days with the Spokane, made their debut at Chicago's Tivoli Theater on December 6, 1926, with a weekly salary of $150. The pair of Crosby and Rinker had already achieved some success when Whiteman recruited pianist and budding lyricist Harry Barris to join them. Joining Whiteman's vocal trio, the group was christened the Rhythm Boys. They collaborated and recorded with artists like as Mildred Bailey, Hoagie Carmichael Eddie Lang, Jack Teagarden, Tommy Dorsey, Jimmy Dorsey, and Bix Beiderbecke. In 1928, Crosby scored his first #1 hit, a jazz-influenced version of Old Man River, and he quickly became the Rhythm Boys' main attraction. His and the other Rhythm Boys' increasing discontent with Whiteman ultimately led to their departure from the group and subsequent enrollment in the Gus Arnheim Orchestra. Once being signed with Brunswick, the other rhythm boys found themselves vocally overshadowed. Not long after this, the band members had an argument and broke up, paving the way for Crosby to pursue solo work. At Your Command, I Surrender, Dear and Wrap Your Troubles in Dreams were just a few of Crosby's later hits that were written by fellow band member Harry Barris. Crosby became one of the most famous American vocalists of the 1930s. In 1931, he was featured in 10 of the top 50 songs, either alone or with additional artists. He made a lasting impression in 1932's The Big Broadcast, his debut feature film, and in 1939, he inked long-term arrangements with Decca Jack Kapp's new record business. At about the same time, Crosby made his radio debut as a solo artist on a famous CBS show with the Carl Fenton Orchestra. He succeeded Paul Whiteman, his old boss, as presenter of the weekly radio show Kraft Music Hall on NBC in 1936 and stayed on for the following decade. Frank Sinatra, Perry Como, Dean Martin, Dick Haymes, John Lennon, Elvis Presley, and Crosby were just a few of the male vocalists who owe a debt of singing styles during the time of recording advancements. Crosby was hailed by Yank magazine as the individual most responsible for boosting the morale of American troops serving abroad during Wedding II. In 1948, he was voted the most admired man alive in the United States, surpassing even Jackie Robinson and Pope Pius XIV. According to Music Digest, Crosby's recordings occupied over half of the 80,000 weekly hours allotted to recorded radio music in America in 1948. In his pursuit of superior recording quality, Crosby used the technology of German tape recorders. Thanks to his funding, Ampex was able to manufacture the Ampex 200, the first tape recorder made in the United States. Musicians like Les Paul were ecstatic about the breakthrough that revolutionized the industry editing and overdubbing. Beyond technological advancements, Crosby had a significant influence through his mastery of the microphone, which he used to great effect in his concerts. People all throughout the globe were captivated by his deep baritone voice and meticulous attention to lyrics. His ability to switch gears from radio to movies was a major factor in his lasting impact. Personal issues, including his drunkenness and family strife, plagued Crosby despite his tremendous professional success. The dynamics between him, Dixie, and their children were complicated, and there are differing opinions on how he handled parenting. The death of Dixie in 1952 was a devastating blow to him, and it had a lasting impact on his life and work. Regardless of the difficulties Crosby had in his personal life, his artistic and technological contributions to the entertainment industry will never be forgotten. The entertainment that Crosby provided affected the lives of millions all across the globe. He kept to himself and revealed very little about his real identity, even though he was well known for his public character. His closest associates, including Phil Harris, said they didn't know him to his fullest. With his performance in The Country Girl, he demonstrated his acting chops in a more serious part. The producers had their doubts about casting him as the disturbed actor Frank Elgin, but he won over the critics and cast doubts elsewhere. As a radio host during World War II, Crosby became famous for his interpretation of Irving Berlin's White Christmas, which evoked feelings of nostalgia and serenity. He was involved in a number of activities and pastimes, such as baseball and horse racing, in addition to his extensive career in entertainment. He was also a great benefactor, leaving a large bequest to Gonzaga University. Despite his remarkable character, it is unfortunate that he was an inadequate parent. Although Dennis Lindsay and Gary Crosby's lives were entwined with the glitter and glamour of Hollywood, they were characterized by serious struggles, and in the end, sad conclusions. Although Bing Crosby was an iconic figure in show business, his kids had their share of problems, such as substance abuse and broken relationships at home. We may learn a lot about the challenges of having a famous father from the lives of 3 Crosby children, Dennis Lindsay and Gary, and their tragic finishes by examining their stories. Lindsay Crosby was born to Bing Crosby and Dixie Lee on January 5, 1934, in Los Angeles, California. His parents were Bing and Dixie Lee. Although Lindsay Crosby did not become as famous as his father, he nevertheless faced many obstacles in his life. There was a lot of pressure on Lindsay to live up to the legendary legacy of his famous father. Along with his sisters, Mary Frances and Gary, he was one of 4 children born to Bing Crosby. Because of his father's fame and fortune, Lindsay had an affluent upbringing. Famous for his leading parts in timeless classics such as Going My Way and White Christmas. Bing Crosby was also a celebrated singer. Because of this achievement, the Crosby family was able to live comfortably. Lindsay Crosby, as he matured, took like his father in several ways. He was in several films, including The Big Night, 1951, and The Star, and The Story, 1955. In the entertainment sector, he was never as famous or had a career that matched his father's. Lindsay Crosby had his share of problems throughout life, including battles with alcoholism. Substance misuse was a major problem in his life and the lives of many people in his family. Lindsay Crosby tragically took his own life on December 11, 1989, at the age of 51. The news of his passing brought immense sorrow to his loved ones and admirers, and was a sobering reminder of the hardships he had endured. American music icon Bing Crosby and his first wife, Dixie Lee, had 2 sons, Dennis and Michael Crosby. Dennis was the second son of Bing and Dixie. A member of an illustrious entertainment family, he came into this world in Los Angeles, California, on July 13, 1934, just like his brothers. Because his father was one of the most famous entertainers of the 20th century, Dennis Crosby had an incredibly privileged upbringing and was exposed to the entertainment industry from a young age. The silky singing voice of Dennis Crosby and his leading parts in timeless classics like Going My Way and White Christmas brought him immense fame. Dennis Crosby brothers Philip and Gary and sister Mary Frances were frequently photographed with their father at public events and in family portraits when they were younger. But Dennis, following in his father's footsteps, chose to become an entertainer. Throughout the 50s and 60s, Dennis Crosby was a fixture in the film and television industries. The night the world exploded and the Purple Hills were among his many film roles after his debut in 1957's Mr. Corey. He wasn't only seen in film, he was a frequent guest star on 90s sitcoms, including The Red Skelton Hour and The Jack Benny Program. In spite of his best attempts, Dennis Crosby was never able to match his famous father's level of success in show business. Dennis probably had a tough time advancing in his profession due to Bing Crosby's enormous shadow and the need to fulfill his legacy. Dennis Crosby has his fair share of problems in his private life. In addition to his own struggles, he had to deal with alcoholism, which ran in his family. Tragically, at the age of 56, Dennis Crosby took his own life on May 4, 1991. Gary Crosby, whose given name was Gary Evan Crosby, was born to Bing Crosby and Dixie Lee. The Crosbys were famous American musicians and actors. He entered this world at the City of Angels on June 27, 1933. Gary, like his siblings, had deep roots in the entertainment industry, but he also faced personal challenges and had ambitious plans for his future. His appreciation for music grew stronger as he got older. In a short amount of time, Gary wowed crowds with his remarkable skill, captivating them with his charisma and smooth voice. Despite his obvious abilities, he always maintained a humble and grounded demeanor, refusing to allow his fame cloud his judgment or his vision. What really distinguished Gary, though, was not his music, but rather his steadfast dedication to equality and social justice. At a period when bigotry and prejudice were commonplace, Gary spoke out against injustice and oppression wherever he saw it, using his position to advocate for change. With his charisma and theatrical presence, Gary captivated audiences as a performer. Live, his performances captivated audiences, and his voice brought light to a world that was all too often veiled in shadows. Being born first to Bing Crosby and Dixie Lee was an extraordinary honor for Gary Crosby. Lindsay Phillip and Dennis Crosby all counted him as an older brother. He enjoyed all the advantages of being the son of a major Hollywood actor when he was growing up. After seeing his father succeed in show business, Gary decided to do the same. He aspired to be famous for his singing voice and acting chops. His vocal performances on his father's radio show, The Bing Crosby Show, launched his career. In his 1941 lecture to high school students delivered just before the United States entered the war, Bing showed his feeling of duty and hope by stressing the importance of the students' future contributions to society. It was in 1946 that Bing Crosby achieved his greatest success in the radio business. Records of his monthly live show were still something he desired, despite NBC's strict restrictions against it. Crosby, unfazed, found a new radio station, ABC, that was prepared to copy his Hollywood broadcasts. Despite ABC's terrible image, Crosby's move lifted it from a small competitor. Live radio lost place to pre-recorded shows as more and more celebrities followed suit. Gary first appeared on movie in 1957's Mr. Corey. Several films, including The Big Night, 1951, and The Night the World Exploded, 1957, featured his prolonged acting career. He also had cameo appearances on several popular TV shows around that time, such as Playhouse 90 and Alfred Hitchcock Presents. In spite of his ambitions, Gary struggled to make a name for himself as a vocalist. He followed in his father's footsteps as a music superstar, releasing songs and albums, but never quite making it big. One of Gary Crosby's personal challenges was his strained connection with his famous father. Going My Own Way, published in 1983, was his book of the severe punishment, neglect, and cruelty that he and his siblings suffered at the hands of their parents. The book also addressed Gary's own struggles with addiction. Gary Crosby may not have been as famous or successful as his father, but he was nonetheless an iconic figure in the Crosby family's imprint on the entertainment industry. His frank account provided a new angle on the adored Bing Crosby by illuminating the intricate relationships inside the Crosby family. Unfortunately, at the age of 62, Gary Crosby's life was tragically abruptly ended on August 24, 1995. An honest and illuminating biography of his life, Going My Own Way, was released in 1983. The most disturbing part of the book was when Gary described how his father, Bing, subjected him and his brothers, Philip, Dennis, and Lindsay, to severe and brutal punishment. Gary detailed the psychological and physical torture he endured, including belt beatings. Because of his famously amiable and attractive public image, the public had never seen this side of Bing Crosby. In addition, Gary Crosby discussed the family's struggles with his father's drinking. He said that the fractured connection in the Crosby family was a result of Bing Crosby's heavy drinking. The shadowy sides of Bing's existence were brought to light by this very intimate revelation. The connection between Gary and his father was depicted in his memoir as being tense. Because Bing was so busy with his profession, he was often missing, and he felt abandoned and ignored. From what Gary could see, there was a noticeable emotional gulf between them. Dennis and Lindsay, two of Gary Crosby's siblings, each battled addiction and inner demons, and he detailed their difficulties in depth. A family dealing with several problems was shown in the novel. The book mostly dealt on Gary's life and his father-son relationship. However, it also touched on his ambitions for the future. He spoke about how he tried to make it as an actor and singer, frequently living in his renowned father's shadow. The history of the family doesn't seem to fascinate Philip's twin, Dennis. He refers to the book as Gary's company. Dennis acknowledges that Gary is angry, but he doesn't refute his story. Lindsay, his 45-year-old baby brother, he continued by saying, is on Gary's side. In contrast, Lindsay was relieved that his brother Gary had written the book, and hoped that it put an end to many of the long-standing myths and falsehoods. Nonetheless, Lindsay's support comes as a surprise. Among the four, he was supposedly Bing's favorite. Other friends and family members have been awakened by Gary's public pronouncements. Band leader Bob Crosby, who was 69 years old, defended his brother Bing by saying that he never remembered anybody being physically touched. Philip Crosby, whose given name was Philip Lang Crosby, was born on July 13, 1934, in Los Angeles, California. He was the older brother of Dennis and Lindsay Crosby. His famous American parents were singer-actor Bing Crosby and his first wife, Dixie Lee. He was their first son. In addition to his four children, Mary Elizabeth Dixie Lee Flip and Philip Crosby Jr., Philip Crosby also leaves behind three half-siblings, Harry, Mary Frances, and Nathaniel, from Bing Crosby's second marriage to Catherine Grant. Philip Crosby followed in his father's footsteps and became an entertainer, much like his siblings. Although he had a relatively long career in show business, he never became as famous as his father. He played a younger Jim Hardy in Holiday Inn, 1942, one of several films in which he acted. Jim Hardy was his father's role. In addition to guest starring on TV shows, he and his father would occasionally take the stage together. When it came to his leisure activities, Philip Crosby was never satisfied with just one. Throughout his career, he served as both a stockbroker and a Marine. His final performance was at a Burbank Elks Club party in 1983, he revealed to People magazine. It had been a full year since his previous performance. He was already a four-time married man with three wives who were showgirls from Sin City. In 1980, he was also jailed many times for drunk driving. Despite attending Alcoholics Anonymous for 18 months, he informed the magazine that he no longer drinks. While Philip was a college student, his father had a driver bring him a brand new Chevrolet, according to Chuck Morrell, the team's outstanding fullback who lived with Crosby at the time. Philip maintained ties to the entertainment world via his family, even though he had a varied life. Philip Crosby, like other members of the Crosby family, unfortunately battled alcoholism and other personal problems all through his life. Both his personal and professional lives were impacted by these issues. Philip Crosby died Thursday, January 13, 2004, at the age of 69. The loss of yet another Crosby child, who had grown up in the limelight thanks to their famous father, was a devastating blow to his loved ones and admirers. While doing an interview in 1959, Bing spoke about his feelings of guilt about his parenting. He made the observation that he was not a good parent. Additionally, he said that he thought he had let them down by lavishing them with financial resources, demanding too much discipline and labor, and failing to provide them with sufficient time and attention. Bing even went so far as to say that he and their mother, who is also their wife, tried our hardest. It is worth noting that Lindsay stood by his dad throughout that time, saying that his dad has a hard time feeling like he has let them down as a parent. Reading that his father had made such a statement in an interview was incredibly distressing for Lindsay. When Bing responded that all he wanted to do was give his boys a little bit of what his dad had given him, he went on to convey his frustrations even more. At the age of 73, Bing Crosby passed away on October 14, 1977. In 1989, Lindsay Crosby took her own life, and 2 years later, Dennis Crosby did the same. In 1995, Gary Crosby passed away due to complications stemming from lung cancer. Much obliged for your time. Before you go see another one of our entertaining videos, and subscribe to our channel.